This is Chaos Radio 89.3 FM here in Olympia. We are on the line with Sylvia McAdam. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself. I want to talk about your new book, Nationhood Interrupted.
Hi. Well, my name is Sylvia McAdam, SAYSEWAHUM. I'm from the Treaty 6 lands. I'm from the nation called nêhiyawak, but we're also called the Cree people in the English language. I recently published a book, and it's newly released, and it's called Nationhood Interrupted, Revitalizing NêHIYAW Legal Systems.
And so again, thanks for calling in and sharing with us. I wanted to just talk, one of the things about your book that I loved it. You said in here, guided by creation, laws, protocols, and methodologies, task and a role not easily met. And talking about how Native people were not lawless people, and they had the laws of creation. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, at the time when the Europeans first came to Turtle Island, to the Indigenous lands, they found Indigenous people living in various societies that were structured, sustainable, and had structures of leadership inherent and guided by Indigenous law. Now, I can't speak for the other nations, but I can almost guarantee that a lot of them have laws, because where there is structure, there is law. And that's what there is within Indigenous nations when we look towards them and we identify and demonstrate that there's processes of leadership. With the nêhiyawak, those processes of leadership are in our stories, in our songs, in our ceremonies, and everything that we do, our way of being and our way of doing. In fact, people have described our processes as prayers in motion. Even the drumming and the dancing, they all tell a story, they all tell a history. They also demonstrate and express law, and those orders of law are limited in the language of the colonizer. So in order to truly speak law, as in nêhiyawak understand it, the language is so critical in it. So all through the book, I talk about the laws in the language. And I'm hoping that other nations will use this book as a template to begin revitalizing their laws as well.
Absolutely. I have an uncle that always would say, when you learn the song and you learn it in the old language, that tells the story of how to be. And it's so important for us to come back to the language. And I feel this with all cultures that were earth-based cultures, that are native cultures all over the planet, had these laws that you talked about. And I love what you put in the book also. You said, when we are born into our humanity, we are born into our nation's obligations and responsibilities. That's so true. And how there was a direct attempt to erase that. And to come back into our humanity, we have to come back into knowing who our people are.
Absolutely. And we see, I recognize that these are the colonizer systems when we refer to the United Nations. However, when you look at the United Nations discourse and processes, in order to be considered a nation or to be recognized as a nation and demonstrate being a nation, there are three core elements you must meet. And those three core elements are: you must have language, you must have land, and you must have culture. And all three of these have a system of leadership, right? They have systems of leadership. So for us as Indigenous people, we cannot keep calling ourselves nations if we don't have our language, if we cannot demonstrate we still have our culture, and we need to know where our lands are. And I'm not talking about the reserved lands, those tiny postage size stamps of lands that are under the Indian Act. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about our territories, our lands, our rivers, all of them have our history written onto them. I know that the colonizer says that we don't have a written language, we don't have a written history, but that's not wrong, because we do have a written history, but it's written out on the land, it's written out on our rivers, it's written in our ceremonies, our songs, our lodges, in our ceremonial bundles, all these different things. Just because it's not written in a European textbook does not mean that it isn't history. Again, it's that erasure of Indigenous people, and we cannot allow it, because our history is just as critically important and just as beautiful and just as a demonstration of our nationhood. So when I say our history is written out on the land, I'm talking about the pictographs and petroglyphs and the songs and the lodges that speak about our connection to the mountains, to the rivers, to streams, to the animals. All of these are important.
Absolutely, and I don't know how it is in Canada. Maybe you could speak to this, but in the States, they're still really operating under a 1934 framework that was imposed on our Native nations here. In that it says right in the state of Washington in the Constitution, and basically when I took a look at it, it said that the tribal nations here, their sovereignty is higher sovereignty than the state sovereignty. So they've been breaking the law since the occupation. We talk a little bit about
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar here on our side of Turtle Island. Canada is a colonial state. Our agreements in terms of the treaty that we took is with the British monarchy. And when we say nation to nation, that's what this is talking about. That's the dialogue, and currently Canada is in violation of that by not implementing or adhering to treaty. We are truly the nations. However, because of the Indian Act, we're oppressed and suppressed under this, in my opinion, a very racist, illegal act. And it's still, to this day, when we talk about freedom, liberation, and self-determination, Indigenous people within these colonial systems do not have that. We absolutely do not have it.
So we talk about how, like you were saying, nationhood it's about land, language, and culture, and it's tied into our sovereignty as people. And can we talk a little bit about that the sovereignty, and how the nations within the nations here, we have to reclaim our history, I guess, and as you're talking through the book, and be guided through these oral traditions into, in my mind, it's the anchor that's going to bring us into the next phase of the earth. Because like yourself, I'm concerned with all the things that are happening on the planet, and we have to come back into this this way of seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we speak about sovereignty, again, it's that connection to knowing who you are, knowing your lands, knowing those inherent structures of leadership. Because when we talk about the colonizers' democracy, that's problematic, because their definition of equality is based on the sameness of people. But when you look at equality, equality is recognizing the differences in people and nations, and the concept of equality with the colonizer is problematic, especially within the colonizing states. And we see that in the international discourse as well, and the sovereignty that we need to begin expressing and pursuing and pressuring these colonizing states is that self-determination. Self-determination in the United Nations is that Indigenous people will be self-determining not only for the citizenship of their people, but also in the resources, in the lands, and their ability to protect those very things, including for example, I'm filling out a proposal to present at the Healing Our Spirits Worldwide conference, and to me, not only are we just healing the human spirit, we have to, as Indigenous people, begin speaking for those that don't have a voice, and those are the swimmers, the crawlers, the four-legged, the winged, and the planet. See, that's what is so unique and sovereign about Indigenous people. We have that within our structures. Our laws guide us and direct us that we must protect all of our relatives that we're related to in our kinship systems, and that means the animals, their children, the winged, their children, because if they're unhealthy, we're certainly going to be unhealthy as human beings.
So in the book, you did also talk about the reconnection of nationhood, and as we know, most of my listeners would when we've been talking over the years and how it has been interrupted, and it has not. Native people have not had the opportunity to get their voice out there, and it's what there's a saying that Uncle told me 7 generations ago. There was a prayer that was laid down for all of us, and it did get interrupted, but it's up to us, the 7th generation, and we're moving forward. Do you see coming back into, because this book to me is sacred law. The sacred law that Native people, they were here and they understand, like you were saying, everything is it's in the mountains, it's in the petroglyphs, it's in the sacred sites. And I want to talk about jurisdiction, because it was nothing for Native people to travel 200-300 miles to go to a ceremony. So
absolutely, yeah, it was our jurisdiction for the nêhiyawak. The Cree women, our jurisdiction, and this is what I was raised to believe, is that our jurisdiction is over land and water, that we must, our responsibility and obligation is to protect and defend those very things, that we had the authority to speak about them. And I can't speak about the men's laws. The men need to begin understanding those and exploring those, but when a person, an Indigenous person, or all persons, when they begin to understand what their jurisdiction and power is, it becomes that much more powerful when you stand up to defend those very things. So, but Brian, I have to go. I gotta go board my flight.
All right, no, it's fine. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. And we'll continue this conversation sometime soon. But again, thanks.
Absolutely. Could I just like to tell your listeners that to believe in the elders, to believe in the earth prophecies, and to believe in our inherent structures, because that's where our power is, and that's where our jurisdiction is, and that's what helped me to stand up when Idle No More continues to empower Indigenous people and all people, because it's a privilege to have this conversation today. It's a privilege to talk about nationhood and all these beautiful things. But when we reach that point when we run out of water and we run out of clean lands, our conversation is not going to be about nationhood. It's not going to be about treaties. It's going to be a whole different dialogue. And we're seeing that in other parts of the world. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind is California. They have a year of water. So I don't think their conversation is about nationhood or sovereignty. Their conversations are like, where are we going to get water?
Yeah.
And I think all of us who are in that privileged state of still having clean water, I think we should be that much more diligent to protect it